Okay, welcome to this session for creating an interactive HR dashboard. Now, what you have on the screen at the moment is an HR dashboard that was created from an employee data. What we can see from the dashboard at the moment. A dashboard is actually a data visualization tool where you'll be able to see the essential key metrics. In this case, we're dealing with human resources data. Here you could see the number of employees at a glance. You could see the average employee age, 39, the average length of service in years, that's 10. And you could also see the number of employees by gender, out all at a glance, the numbers of employees by job grade. Now also you could see the employee age distribution, the employee length of service, then the numbers of employees employed by year. And here you have what we call the slicers. That's what makes it interactive. So take for example, if I choose to say who are the individuals or employees in admin, for example, what you will notice is that, can you see the data changing to those in admin? Let me take that. Let me clear this and try that all over again. Okay, can you see? Now, at a glance, you would notice from here that the employees in admin are 22 and they're all male as it is. Then you could see in terms of the distribution across the entire job grade. You have them in top management, two of them officer and mid management, as the case may be. And you could see their age distribution and when exactly they were employed within the organization. So this is a simplified HR dashboard. So what we're going to be doing in the next couple of minutes is how do you get to create what you have on your screen now. Okay, so we're going to be using an already treated process HR data, which you could replicate everything you have here using your own organizational HR data, as the case may be. So let me get into the main data that I want to use to create. So this is the data we're going to be using. So this is the data. This is the employee data. You have the date of birth, you have today's date, the age range, and every other details that are there. So this is the data we're going to be using to create this dashboard in itself. Okay, so this is what we're going to be creating in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so in order for you to be able to create what we have here, your knowledge of Microsoft Excel must be at intermediate level, meaning that you would be able to manipulate the data, because we're going to be using what we call a pivot table. Also, we're going to be using an Excel table at the same time. So first thing first is, once you've created your data, you've plugged in your data this way, you've calculated the age range using this formula. This formula is just subtracting today's date was created using a today day function. So if I open this data tomorrow, it would show the date. So this is showing the date at which this was created, as you can see. Now if I go ahead to calculate the age, that's what we have. Similarly, you could see the age range done with if statement. That's why we said for you to really understand what we're seeing here, your knowledge of Microsoft Excel must be at intermediate level. So back to the subject of discussion. Okay, so we have this, we want to create all of this into the dashboard that we have right here. Okay, so let's dive into how to do that. Okay, first thing first, you could do this and you could as well skip this process, is to say I'll turn all of this my data into what we call an Excel table. So how do I go do that? Just click in your data and go to format as a table. What this does for you, so you have my table as headers and you have the range, cell range. I just leave it as it is and click OK. So this is what happened. So now what has happened is that Excel has taken the entire data and turn them into an old table. So this old data can now be used. Can you see? These are all the number of employees that we have with all the data. Now, automatically, by virtue of turning it into an Excel table, if you look at your Excel, I'm using Excel 365 for you to have maximum to be able to replicate what we're doing right away. You must be using a minimum of Excel 2013. That's the best way you could enjoy, and most of the features that you're seeing at the moment will be replicated on your system. So if you look at the screen, you would see the design, which is highlighted by virtue of turning it into an Excel table. This is what I need summarized as a pivot table. Now, if you don't go through this route, you could also go through the route of going to insert and invoking your pivot table. So for me to be able to, I'm going to be using both simultaneously. Now, what I will need to do now is to create another table, which I'm going to rename as HR dashboard. So you rename that as HR dashboard. This is where most of the magic would be happening. So I've renamed that as HR dashboard. I want my pivot table to come here. So this is what I'm going to do. Let me go by virtue of the design option, and I say summarize but with pivot table. Now, when you're using a pivot table, one interesting thing about pivot tables is the fact that it helps you to summarize large sets of data. Now, this data can be shown in different places. You could have it in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. Now, also another interesting thing, so this is what happens if I say it should go to a new worksheet. But what I want to do is I want it to go to my my sheet, my worksheet that I've named HR dashboard. So let me go back to my original data. I don't need this anymore, so I take it out. I come back to my original data. Now I can do some interesting things here. I can rename this entire table. So let me rename it as HR underscore dashboard. Usually when you're naming tables, it doesn't recognize spaces, so this whole table has been renamed as my HR dashboard. So when I come here, I say summarize as a table. Can you see the difference? You know, I have my table being named as HR underscore dashboard. Now I want it to be on an existing worksheet, so I click existing worksheet and I go to the table I have already named HR dashboard. I come here and I click anywhere, but I want it to be somewhere in my B2 cell. So I click OK. You can see it's now referencing the worksheet I'm working with. So I say OK, and boom, that's my dashboard. Okay, now this is my pivot table fields. Now, yes, I'm using Excel 365. Microsoft Office 365, and I've also done some work on my pivot table field, so you could actually do as much as you want. It would be floating at the right hand side this way, but in my case I've done some work on it, but you would definitely be able to see something that replicate this. Now, so what I need to do is I want to recreate what you have here. I want the numbers of employees displayed, the average employee age, and the average length of service displayed as well. So I'll drop my employee ID in the values column, and you'll see that's already showing you the total number of employees. So Excel goes to the data, the main data, and summarizes the numbers of employees. So I'm going to do some work here. What I need to do is just to rename this as number of employees. So that's going to be the first thing. I can rename that, so I have numbers of employees. That's the first point. I need the age. If you come here and drop the age in the values column, the first thing that comes up is it sums up the entire age of all the 364 employees. Now, one thing I need is actually the average, so I right click on that value, and I go to summarize value as average. Now, seeing that is giving me 39.46, I don't need I need the nearest whole number, so I right click again and go to number format. From my number format, I can now go to numbers and remove the decimal points and click OK, so that I have 39 there. Now the next thing I need also is the average length of service. So I go to the average length of service and I drop my average length of service, also length of service in the values column. Now that's also giving me as a sum, so I come here and I also to go to the same form, average, and that gives me average here. I don't want this to be, I want it to be nearest whole number, number format, and remove the decimal point and OK. So I have all the name range. If I want to change all of these names, I could. Now this is where the magic is. The next magic is, see what we want to do. We want it to be this way. So the magic there is this. You come here, you notice that in the columns section, Excel as using the pivot table option has summarized each of this guy and put them here. Now this is where the magic is. If you bring this values guy and drop into rows, this is the magic. The magic is that each of what you have now been created into this wonderful rearrangement, basically. So I come here and change this into key metrics. I change this into key metrics and I have all of what I need. Now, in order to guard my data against any edits, usually when you would update a pivot table, the length and the width of the columns are likely to change. In order to guide against that, I can do something. So I highlight the pivot table and I go to options. From the options column, I go to auto fit column width on update. I uncheck and I click OK. Then also I can apply any edits that I choose to apply. In this case, let me just work with just trying to give it a new font entirely. So let me give it Kandara. In recent time, I seem to have fallen in love with this font. Okay, so what I've just done is just to now I can do some edits and I can be sure that my edit is not going to be affected by any update that I do after now. Okay, so just adjust that way. Now the next thing I need at the moment is my dashboard is beginning to form out. So the next set is I need to do the summary for the gender and also by grade, and 3 more pivot charts that would be used. Okay, so the next thing now is to bring another pivot table that will create here. So what I need to do is to go back to my main data, and this time around I want to use my insert pivot table option, and I will do existing worksheets, and I go to my HR dashboard where I want the pivot table to be, and I click here and I say OK. So that's the new pivot table. What I want here is the gender. So I scroll down to where gender is and I drop my gender option in my rows column and my column option. Okay, so that's what we have. Now in this case, I have my entire 360 364. You can see the total. Now in this case, since the total is here, I don't need the total down here, so I'll do the same thing in order to remove the edit. So I remove auto fits, so I remove the auto fit option from there so that subsequent ones would not show. I come here too and I remove field headers just to remove this guy. I come also and I go back to my design and I go back to my design of my pivot table and I remove grand totals. I want the grand totals to be off, so it takes off this total and everything reckons with this. One more edit is just to edit the fonts so that everything have the same fonts on the dashboard. So I go back to Kandara, so I've edited that. I can now I'll centralize all my point and rename this. This is another option of renaming. Is either you double click here or you come into the formula bar here and say number of employees by gender. Okay, so number of employees by gender, enter, and you can resize your column, and there we are, our numbers of employees. If I choose to make this central, that's also an option which I can have. So just to double confirm that each of these guys are not going to change later, so I go to analyze. Okay, so let's do something. The first pivot table that I've created, let me rename it as key matrix pivot table, key matrix. Okay, the second pivot table that I've created, let me rename it as gender. Okay, this will become useful later, and be sure that is on check on auto fits. Okay, on check. Okay, so that once I bring in another pivot table, that is not going to change. So the next thing I need to do now is to bring in my number of employees by job group. That's another pivot table entirely. So I come back here. This is where I want that to come. So I go back to my main data. I have two options of bringing my pivot table down this time around. Is that I click in the data set, go to design, summarize as a table, or go to insert and pivot table to insert pivot table. So let me use this again. You pick existing worksheet, you go to the data where you want it to be and click there. Okay, and boom, you have your data set there. Now basically what I need here is the job grade drop in the rows column and also in the values column, so it summarizes them. The same way, I don't need this header here, so I take it off by unchecking field headers. Then I come here and I rename this as number of employees by job grade, number of employees by job grade. Okay, so that's sorted. So I can change all my fonts to the same value of Kandara, just trying to be a bit consistent here. Then centralize my values here. Now I'm going to take this grand total off, so click on the pivot table, go to design, grand total, and uncheck, take them off, so that goes off. So we're good now. So that the numbers of employees by job grade. So so that's what we have. So that's the third pivot table. Now we have three more pivot tables, or these are charts in actual sense. They are not created by Excel charts. They are derived from the pivot table itself. So we have three more pivot table to create three pivot charts. So three pivot tables that would create three pivot charts. So because these are pivot charts, these are three pivot charts.